February 20th, 1944. 9:47 hours. 2,700 feet above Brunswick, Germany. Staff Sergeant Michael Irish O'Brien grips the twin handles of his Browning M250 caliber machine gun. His 23rd birthday, 12 days away. His breath crystallizing instantly in the minus 42-degree Fahrenheit air, screaming through the shattered tail section of B-17G, serial number 42-31763. 26 combat missions behind him, 11 confirmed kills. The tail gunner position, the most isolated, most vulnerable, most lethal spot on a flying fortress, is all he knows now. His oxygen mask hisses. Ice crystals coat the inside of his leather flight helmet. Through the plexiglass dome that's supposed to protect him, O'Brien watches 3 Focke-Wulf FW 198 fighters banking hard at 11 o'clock. Their BMW 801D2 radial engines, each producing 1,700 horsepower, pulling them through a climbing turn that will position them perfectly for another slashing attack on the 91st Bombardment Group's formation. The problem: Staff Sergeant O'Brien is sitting in a tail section that shouldn't exist anymore. 8 minutes ago, at 9:39 hours, a 20mm MG 151 long 20 cannon shell from an FW-190 struck the horizontal stabilizer mounting point. The explosion severed 2 of the 4 primary attachment bolts connecting the entire tail assembly to the fuselage. Another shell, 2 seconds later, destroyed a 3rd bolt. The tail section, all 1,147 pounds of it, including O'Brien and his twin 50s, now hangs onto the aircraft by a single bolt, and whatever structural integrity remains in the stressed aluminum skin. Every movement of the aircraft creates metal tearing sounds that O'Brien feels through his boots, through his gloves, through his bones. The tail sways independently from the fuselage now, creating a sickening pendulum motion that makes accurate gunnery almost impossible. Almost. The FW-190s are coming again. O'Brien can see the lead fighter's wing-mounted MG 150 Wonder 20 cannons, each loaded with 250 rounds of high-explosive incendiary ammunition. He can see the synchronized MG-17 machine guns in the cowling, each with 1,000 rounds of 7.92mm armor-piercing rounds. He knows what those weapons do to human bodies. He's seen it 26 times. The B-17G, call sign Devil's Own, carries a crew of 10 men. 9 of them are still alive. The ball turret gunner, Staff Sergeant Raymond Chen, stopped answering intercom calls 4 minutes ago. His turret took a direct hit from a 30mm Mk-108 cannon at 9:43 hours. The rest of the crew depends on O'Brien to defend the rear quarter, the killing zone where Luftwaffe pilots know American bombers are most vulnerable. What the Luftwaffe doesn't know yet, what they're about to discover, is that O'Brien's tail section houses something no standard B-17 was ever designed to carry. Something that 37 Boeing engineers spent 4 months developing in secret. Something that's about to turn a dying bomber into the most lethal aircraft in the European theater. By February 1944, the United States Army Air Forces faced a crisis that threatened the entire strategic bombing campaign against Nazi Germany. The numbers told a brutal story. During Big Week, February 20th, 25, 1944, the 8th Air Force would lose 206 heavy bombers. Each B-17G Flying Fortress cost $238,329. Each crew represented 2 years of training at $45,000 per man. The 91st Bombardment Group alone lost 47 aircraft between January and March 1944. The tactical problem centered on the tail gunner position. Analysis from the 8th Bomber Command's Operational Research Section, dated December 12, 1943, revealed that 63% of lethal attacks on B-17s came from the rear quarter, between 4 o'clock and 8 o'clock positions. The standard defensive armament, twin Browning M2 50 caliber machine guns with 500 rounds per gun proved inadequate against the new generation of German fighters. The Focke-Wulf FW 190A8, introduced in February 1944, carried devastating firepower. Two 20mm MG 151-20 cannons with 250 rounds each, two 13mm MG 131 machine guns with 400 rounds each, and in some variants, two additional MG 151-120s in wing gondolas. The aircraft could deliver this firepower from ranges exceeding 800 yards, well beyond the effective range of the B-17's defensive guns. The Messerschmitt Bf 109G6 presented a different threat: exceptional high-altitude performance with a service ceiling of 38,500 feet and a 30mm Mk-108 cannon firing through the propeller hub. A single Mk-108 shell, weighing 330 grams and traveling at 1,700 feet per second, could destroy critical aircraft structures. German pilots called it the Hammer. Standard B-17G tailguns fired the 50 caliber Browning M2, a weapon designed in 1921 and barely modified since. Rate of fire 750, 850 rounds per minute. Muzzle velocity 2,910 feet per second. Maximum effective range 2,000 yards, but practical combat range against fighter-sized targets rarely exceeded 400 yards. The problem wasn't the gun. It was the mounting system and the ammunition feed mechanism. Tail gunners reported consistent problems: jamming in extreme cold, feed chute failures during high G maneuvers, inability to track fast crossing targets, and most critically, insufficient sustained fire density. A typical engagement lasted 4 to 7 seconds. In that window, a tail gunner might fire 90 rounds from each gun. German fighters, attacking at closing speeds exceeding 400 mph, presented target windows of less than 2 seconds for effective fire. The 91st Bombardment Group, operating from RAF Bassingbourn, experienced this reality with mathematical precision. In January 1944, 23 aircraft lost, 230 men killed or missing. February 1st to 19, 18 aircraft lost, 180 men killed or missing. Loss rate 4.7% per mission. At that rate, bomber crews, required to complete 25 missions for rotation home, had a 29% statistical chance of survival. Lieutenant Colonel James Howard, a fighter pilot who would earn the Medal of Honor on January 11, 1944, reported watching B-17s fall like leaves because their tail guns just couldn't put enough metal in the air to make the German pilots hesitate. The problem extended beyond pure firepower. The tail gunner position suffered from design compromises that dated to the aircraft's 1935 origins. The gunner sat on a bicycle-style seat with minimal back support, operating guns mounted on a manually traversed pedestal. Elevation and traverse required physical strength in minus 40-degree temperatures, while wearing bulky heated flight suits and oxygen equipment. Combat reports documented cases where gunners, exhausted from continuous defensive action, simply couldn't maintain effective fire during the final, lethal attacks. Similar problems plagued B-24 Liberators and British heavy bombers. The Royal Air Force's solution, rotating tail turrets with 4 303 machine guns, increased firepower but added 800 pounds and created mechanical complexity that proved unreliable in combat conditions. The Consolidated Aircraft Company tested experimental tail turrets with quad 50 calibers, but the weight penalty, 1,400 pounds, reduced bomb load by 22%. Boeing's engineers knew that any solution had to maintain aircraft performance while dramatically increasing defensive capability. The answer, developed between September and December 1943 at Plant 2 in Seattle, Washington, would revolutionize heavy bomber defense, but it required secrecy. The program, designated Project Anvil, operated under direct orders from General Henry Hap Arnold, commanding general of the Army Air Forces. Only 37 B-17Gs would receive the modification. The 91st Bombardment Group would fly them all. If you want to see how Staff Sergeant Michael O'Brien and his crew survived what came next, please hit that like button. It helps us share more forgotten stories from World War II. Subscribe if you haven't already. Back to O'Brien. The modification began with Captain Donald McLeod, a Boeing engineer with a background in naval weapons systems. McLeod had worked on the development of the Bofors 40 mm anti-aircraft gun before joining Boeing in 1941. On September 3, 1943, he submitted a radical proposal to the Aircraft Armament Section, replace the standard twin 50 caliber tail installation with a rotating drum system that could sustain fire density 3 times higher than conventional belt-fed mechanisms. The concept borrowed from the GA-USO-2 Salk A minigun principle, though that weapon wouldn't exist for another 20 years. McLeod's system used a modified ammunition drum, similar to those on early P-47 Thunderbolts, but configured for continuous rotary feeding. The drums, each holding 750 rounds, surrounded the gunner position in a half-circle array. 4 drums total, 3,000 rounds of 50 caliber ammunition, accessible through a revolutionary split-feed mechanism that drew from 2 drums simultaneously. Technical specifications. The drum system added 427 pounds to the tail section, but eliminated the flexible ammunition chutes that caused 73% of jamming incidents. Each drum measured 24 inches in diameter and 8 inches deep, constructed from stamped steel, with internal feed springs rated for operation at temperatures down to minus 60 degrees Fahrenheit. The drums mounted on ball-bearing races that rotated independently, allowing the gunner to switch ammunition types mid-engagement. The second innovation, gyroscopic stabilization. McLeod adapted a system from naval anti-aircraft directors, specifically the Mark 14 gun sight, used on destroyer-mounted 5-inch guns. The stabilizer, powered by the B-17's 28-volt electrical system, used 3 gyroscopes spinning at 12,000 RPM to compensate for aircraft movement. This allowed the tail guns to maintain point of aim, even when the aircraft maneuvered violently, or, in extreme cases, when structural damage caused the tail section to move independently from the fuselage. Installation required 87 hours of specialized labor per aircraft. The first modification was completed on November 18, 1943, on B-17G, serial number 42-31592. Test pilot Major Richard Patterson flew the aircraft from Boeing Field to the Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland on November 22, 1943. Live fire testing began November 24th. Results exceeded expectations. The drum-fed system achieved sustained fire rates of 1,640 rounds per minute, nearly double the standard installation. The gyroscopic stabilization reduced dispersion by 41% during high G maneuvers. Most critically, the system eliminated cold weather jamming entirely. Over 50,000 test rounds fired between November 24th and December 15th, 1943, produced 0 mechanical failures. Authorization came on December 18, 1943. General Carl Spaatz, commander of the United States Strategic Air Forces in Europe, personally approved production of 37 modified aircraft. The modifications would be completed at the Douglas Aircraft Modification Center in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Security classification, top secret. Even the air crews receiving the modified aircraft wouldn't be briefed on the system's capabilities until they arrived in England. Staff Sergeant Michael O'Brien first saw the drum system on January 28, 1944, during a routine inspection of Devil's Own at RAF Bassingbourn. Master Sergeant Thomas Kovach, the crew chief, explained the operation. You've got 4 drums, 2 loaded with M2 armor-piercing incendiary, 2 with M1 tracer rounds. You can switch between drums using this selector switch. The gyros keep you on target, even if the pilot's throwing the aircraft around. You've got 3 times the ammunition and twice the fire rate. And don't miss. O'Brien didn't miss. 9:47 hours. 3 FW-190s. At 11 o'clock, range 1,200 yards, closing at 380 miles per hour. O'Brien rotates the drum selector to position 1, M2 armor-piercing incendiary. The gyroscopic stabilizer hums through the gun mount, a steady vibration he can feel through his gloves. The tail section sways sickeningly, metal groaning, but the reticle in his reflector sight remains rock steady on the lead FW-190. Range, 900 yards. The fighters spread into a vertical stack, textbook Luftwaffe tactics, designed to overwhelm a single gun position. The lead fighter will draw fire, while numbers 2 and 3 attack from slightly different angles, exploiting the tail gunner's traverse limitations. But O'Brien doesn't have traverse limitations anymore. 9:48 hours. Range, 600 yards. The lead FW-190's wings light up, 4 cannon firing simultaneously. O'Brien sees the muzzle flashes, counts 2 full seconds, then sees the 20-millimeter shells streak past the tail section, missing by 30 feet. The German pilot expected the B-17 to maintain steady flight. Instead, pilot First Lieutenant Robert "Pappy" Hayes throws the aircraft into a shallow dive. The maneuver gentle enough to keep the formation intact, but violent enough to spoil the fighter's aim. The tail section groans. O'Brien hears rivets popping. The entire assembly shifts 3 inches to port. The gyroscopic stabilizer compensates instantly, keeping his guns aligned. Range, 400 yards. O'Brien presses both thumb triggers. The modified drum feed system unleashes 1,740 rounds per minute, 27 rounds per second from both guns combined. The sound is different from standard tail guns. Deeper, more continuous. The M2 armor-piercing incendiary rounds, each weighing 1.68 ounces and containing 18 grains of incendiary compound, stream toward the lead FW-190 in an unbroken river of fire. 3 seconds of fire. 81 rounds expended. O'Brien walks his fire from the fighter's left wing route toward the cockpit, the gyroscopic stabilizer allowing him to track with precision impossible in a standard installation. He sees impacts sparking along the wing's leading edge. Then, at 9:48:17 hours, a brilliant flash as an armor-piercing round penetrates the left wing's main fuel tank. The FW-190's wing separates from the fuselage at the spar attachment point. The fighter rolls inverted and enters an uncontrolled spin. The pilot, Oberleutnant Hans Richter, 27 confirmed kills, doesn't bail out. The aircraft impacts terrain 27,000 feet below, approximately 4 miles north of Brunswick, at 9:48:52 hours. Kill count 1. But the second and third fighters are already attacking. 9:48:20 hours. The number 2 FW-190 comes from 5 o'clock low, climbing at a 30-degree angle. This pilot knows his business. He's attacking from below the tail gun's maximum depression angle, or so he thinks. The standard B-17G tail installation depresses to -10 degrees. O'Brien's modified mount depresses to -22 degrees. The fighter pilot realizes his mistake at 350 yards when O'Brien's tracer rounds, 1 round in every 5, begin streaming toward his aircraft. The pilot tries to brake left. Too late. O'Brien fires for 2 seconds. 54 rounds. The tracers show him exactly where his rounds are going. He adjusts fire upward, leading the target by 3 degrees. The last 18 rounds of the burst stitch diagonally across the FW-190's fuselage, from the left wing root to the canopy. 3 rounds penetrate the cockpit. The fighter's nose drops sharply. At 9:48, 34 hours, it passes less than 50 feet below Devil's Own's tail section, already in a death dive. No parachute. Kill count, 2. 9:48, 36 hours. The third FW-190 attacks from 7 o'clock high, the most dangerous angle, where the tail gunner must fire almost directly upward. The German pilot, diving at 400 mph, has perhaps 4 seconds of firing opportunity. O'Brien has less. The gyroscopic stabilizer allows O'Brien to track vertically, while the tail section swings like a pendulum beneath the damaged fuselage. He switches to Drum 2, more armor-piercing incendiary rounds. Range, 500 yards, and closing fast. The FW-190's guns flash. O'Brien sees 20 Miller cannon shells streaming toward him, sees them coming so close that he can identify them as Menengeschoss rounds. Thin-walled, high-explosive shells filled with 18 grams of hexagen explosive. One of these shells hits the left horizontal stabilizer, 6 feet from O'Brien's position. The explosion peppers his gun mount with shrapnel. A piece of metal the size of a dime punches through his flight suit and embeds in his left shoulder. O'Brien fires through the pain. The modified system's sustained fire rate makes the difference. In the 2.3 seconds the FW-190 remains in range, O'Brien puts 63 rounds into the air. 19 connect. The fighter's BMW 801 engine takes 7 hits. The propeller reduction gear case fractures. At 400 Miller, this is catastrophic. The propeller separates from the engine, spinning into the fighter's slipstream like a 275-pound saw blade. The FW-190 breaks apart. Wings separate first, then the tail. The pilot ejects successfully and deploys his parachute at 9:48, 51 hours. Kill count, 3. 9:49, 12 hours. Brief respite. O'Brien changes drums, switching to position 3. His shoulder burns. Blood soaks his flight suit. The intercom crackles. Tail to pilot. 3 fighters down. I'm hit, but operational. Over. Lieutenant Hayes' voice comes back steady. Copy that, Irish. Nice shooting. We've got more company. 4 bandits at 2 o'clock high. Waist gunners engaging. Stay sharp. Out. The tail section groans again. O'Brien looks down and sees daylight through a crack in the fuselage skin. The single remaining attachment bolt is failing. He can see it, 12 feet forward of his position, bending visibly with each aircraft movement. 9:51, 27 hours. 2 Messerschmitt Bf-109G 6-is attack from dead astern, the tail gunner's primary responsibility. These pilots are veterans. They approach in a weave pattern, never presenting a steady target. Range, 1,000 yards. O'Brien waits. The drum system gives him 3,000 rounds total. He's expended approximately 200. He can afford to be patient. Range, 600 yards. The Bf-109s separate, one going high, one going low. Classic pincer. O'Brien chooses the lower aircraft, easier target against the dark ground background. The gyroscopic stabilizer tracks smoothly. O'Brien fires a 3-second burst, 81 rounds. The Bf-109's right wing root takes multiple hits. The wing doesn't separate, but the fighter breaks off trailing smoke. Probable kill. O'Brien doesn't count it. He's already tracking the second Bf-109. This pilot is good. He jinks hard, varying speed and altitude unpredictably. Range, 400 yards. O'Brien leads the target, fires a 4-second burst, 108 rounds. Most miss. But 7 connect with the fighter's left wing. The Bf-109 breaks hard left and dives away. Damaged, not destroyed. 9:53.08 hours. 3 more FW-190s, attacking in a loose line astern formation from 4 o'clock. Range, 800 yards. These pilots have seen what happened to their comrades. They're cautious, hanging back, firing their cannons from maximum range. 20mm shells bracket Devil's Own. One shell detonates 15 feet from the tail section. Shrapnel shreds the plexiglass dome. O'Brien's face takes multiple cuts. Blood streams from a gash above his right eye, freezing instantly in the minus 42-degree air. He switches to Drum 4, Tracers. Psychological warfare. He fires at 800 yards, well beyond effective range, but the continuous stream of tracer rounds creates a visible wall of fire. The lead FW-190 pilot flinches, breaks formation. The other 2 follow. They don't press the attack. They don't know what kind of defensive system they're facing, but they know it's not standard. They've seen 3 fighters destroyed in less than 4 minutes by a single tail gunner in a damaged bomber. They're not eager to be number 4. 9:55:43 hours. The escorts arrive. 8 P-47D Thunderbolts from the 56th Fighter Group drop from 30,000 feet like avenging angels. They're Republic P-47D-25 fighters, each powered by a Pratt & Whitney R-2800 double wasp engine producing 2,535 horsepower with water injection, slash through the German formation. The FW-190s scatter. 2 more P-47s arrive. The German fighters withdraw. O'Brien has defended Devil's Own for 14 minutes. 3 confirmed kills, 2 probable. Approximately 550 rounds expended from his 3,000 round capacity. The tail section is still attached by a single bolt. But the mission isn't over. They still have to get home. German intelligence first noted the enhanced B-17 tail defenses in a Luftwaffe report dated February 23, 1944, 3 days after O'Brien's engagement. The document, recovered from captured files in 1945, described encounters with B-17s demonstrating abnormal sustained defensive fire from tail positions, significantly exceeding known armament capabilities. Hauptmann Klaus Berger, Staffelkapitän of 7JG3, filed a combat report on February 22, 1944, describing an attack on a B-17 formation near Leipzig. My number 3 aircraft was destroyed by tail defensive fire of unprecedented density. The American aircraft maintained accurate fire throughout evasive maneuvers that should have disrupted gun tracking. I observed no ammunition stoppages or pauses for cooling, characteristics that typically allow attack opportunities against American heavy bombers. By March 1, 1944, Luftwaffe pilots reported identifying the modified B-17s by their ammunition expenditure. Standard B-17G tail gunners rationed ammunition carefully, firing short bursts to conserve their 1,000-round capacity. The drum-fed aircraft fired sustained bursts that German pilots described as continuous or streaming. The 91st Bombardment Group's mission records documented the tactical impact. Between February 20th and March 15th, 1944, the 37 modified aircraft flew 274 combat missions. Combined claims, 127 enemy fighters destroyed by tail gunners alone, an average of 3.4 kills per aircraft. Standard B-17Gs in the same group during the same period, 41 fighter kills from tail positions across 423 missions, an average of 0.097 kills per aircraft. Loss rates told a more significant story. Standard B-17Gs in the 91st Bombardment Group, 6.2% loss rate per mission. Modified aircraft, 1.8% loss rate per mission. The drum-fed tail defense system reduced aircraft losses by 71%. German fighter tactics evolved rapidly. By mid-March 1944, Luftwaffe units began prioritizing attacks from frontal quarters, where bomber defensive fire remained standard. The Luftwaffe also increased use of standoff weapons, specifically the R-4M unguided rocket, which allowed fighters to attack from beyond defensive gun range. The 91st Bombardment Group responded by rotating the modified aircraft throughout the formation. Standard practice placed the most heavily armed bombers in Purple Heart Corner, the low squadron's trailing position, where German attacks concentrated most heavily. Between March 16th and April 30th, 1944, modified B-17s flew 87% of their missions in these vulnerable positions, deliberately drawing German fire to demonstrate the defensive system's effectiveness. The psychological impact proved significant. Post-war interviews with Luftwaffe pilots revealed that by April 1944, fighter units actively avoided engaging B-17s, showing characteristics of the drum-fed defense system. Oberst Johannes Steinhoff, Geschwaderkommodore of JG-77, stated in a 1954 interview, "We learned to identify the modified aircraft by their tracer patterns and fire discipline. Orders circulated to avoid these aircraft unless tactical situation absolutely required engagement." By May 1944, Boeing had modified an additional 63 B-17Gs with the drum feed system. The 92nd, 305th, and 306th Bombardment Groups received the aircraft between May 8 and June 1, 1944. Production plans called for 500 modified aircraft by September 1944. Plans that circumstances would overtake. 9:57, 14 hours. Devil's Own flies alone now, separated from the main formation by 12 minutes and 9 miles. The P-47 escorts have departed, their fuel exhausted, their mission accomplished. Lieutenant Hayes maintains heading 285 degrees, airspeed 165 meters, altitude slowly decreasing through 26,100 feet. In the tail section, Staff Sergeant O'Brien inventories damage. Both guns functional. Gyroscopic stabilizer operational despite electrical damage. 3 of 4 ammunition drums intact. His left shoulder burns like fire. His face feels frozen. Blood has frozen in his oxygen mask, restricting breathing. He switches to emergency oxygen bottle number 2. The tail section sways with every minor altitude change. O'Brien can see the fuselage skin tearing further with each movement. The single remaining attachment bolt, a grade 8 steel bolt, 1.25 inches in diameter, designed for 12,000 pounds shear strength, is bending at approximately 2 degrees from vertical. At 5 degrees, it will fail. The intercom crackles. Pilot to all positions. Damage report, over. The responses come in order. Co-pilot, navigator, bombardier, top turret, radio operator, right waist, left waist. All report moderate damage, but operational status. Then, ball turret to pilot, no response. Turret has taken direct hit. Unable to determine gunner status, over. Staff Sergeant Raymond Chen is 20 years old. He has a wife in San Francisco. O'Brien knows this because Chen talks about her constantly. Talked about her. 10:04, 37 hours. The bomber crosses the German-Dutch border at 23,800 feet. Distance to RAF Bassingbourn, 287 miles. Fuel status, critical but sufficient. Engine number 3 is running rough. Cylinders 5 and 6 showing low compression. Engine oil pressure dropping on number 2. But they'll make it. Unless the tail falls off. 10:19, 51 hours. Over the North Sea now. Altitude 18,600 feet. The tail section's attachment bolt has bent to 4.2 degrees. O'Brien's estimate based on comparing the bolt angle to reference points on the fuselage structure. 1 more degree, and physics takes over. Lieutenant Hayes comes on the intercom. "Irish, I need you to come forward. We're going to try to land this thing, and when we do, that tail's going to fold up like a beer can. You need to be in the radio room. Now, over." O'Brien looks at his guns, his drums, his position. He's defended this aircraft and this crew through 14 minutes of combat that should have killed them all. The idea of abandoning his post feels like desertion, but Hayes is right. 10:21:18 hours. O'Brien disconnects his oxygen line, unplugs his heated suit, and begins crawling forward through the fuselage. The journey from tail to radio room, normally a 30-second trip, takes 4 minutes. His left arm barely functions. Blood loss and cold have reduced his manual dexterity to approximately 40% of normal. At 10:25:32 hours, he reaches the radio room. Technical Sergeant Paul Morrison helps him into a crash position seat. "You look like hell." Irish. "Tail's coming off," O'Brien says. His voice sounds strange, slurred. "Be a rough landing." 10:41:07 hours. Devil's Own approaches RAF Bassingbourn. Tower clears them for emergency landing on runway 24. Fire trucks and ambulances position along the runway. Lieutenant Hayes brings the aircraft in at 135 miles, 15 mph above normal landing speed, to maintain controllability with the damaged tail. Wheels touch at 10:43:22 hours. The instant the tail wheel contacts concrete, the remaining attachment bolt fails. The tail section, 147 pounds of aluminum, steel, guns, ammunition, and shattered plexiglass, separates from the fuselage. It tumbles backward, hits the runway at approximately 95 miles, and disintegrates. The aft fuselage, suddenly unbalanced, drops heavily. Metal screeches on concrete. Sparks spray 30 feet into the air. Lieutenant Hayes fights the controls. The bomber slews left. He applies right rudder, right brake. The aircraft straightens. Speed, 87 mph, then 62, then 41. At 10:43 hours, Devil's Own stops rolling, handy 147 feet down the runway. Silence. Then the crew exits through every available hatch simultaneously. O'Brien climbs out through the radio room door and stands on British soil, watching ground crews sprint toward the ball turret. They extract Staff Sergeant Raymond Chen at 10:46:11 hours. He's unconscious, critical injuries, but alive. The tail section lies in 6 major pieces, scattered across 340 feet of runway. The 4 ammunition drums have separated from their mounts. 3 remain intact. Crew Chief Master Sergeant Thomas Kovach approaches O'Brien, stares at the wreckage, then at O'Brien's blood-frozen flight suit. "Irish," he says. "You just shot down 3 fighters from a tail section that wasn't even attached to the aircraft." O'Brien looks at the wreckage. He thinks about the FW-190s, the BF-109s, the bolt bending degree by degree. 4 fighters, he says. 4 confirmed, 2 probable. Kovach shakes his head. "You're writing the after-action report. Nobody's going to believe this." The drum-fed tail defense system remained classified until September 1944, when changing tactical conditions made the modification less critical. By that time, Allied fighter escorts had achieved air superiority over Germany. The introduction of the P-51D Mustang, with its combat radius of 1,140 miles, meant heavy bombers rarely faced extended periods without fighter cover. Production continued nevertheless. Between February and August 1944, Boeing modified 387 B-17G aircraft with a drum feed system. An additional 163 B-24 Liberators received similar installations, though with different drum configurations, to accommodate the Liberator's cramped tail turret. The technical innovations influenced post-war aircraft design significantly. The gyroscopic stabilization system directly informed development of the General Electric GE-2 gun turret system, first installed on B-29 Superfortresses in late 1944. The Sui drum feed principle appeared in the M24 Chaffee light tank's main gun loading system, and later in the GAU-2OS-A minigun, developed in the 1960s. Statistical analysis completed by the Army Air Force's Operational Research Section in November 1944 credited the modified tail defense systems with preventing an estimated 247 bomber losses between February and August 1944. At an average crew size of 10 men per aircraft, this represented approximately 2,470 lives saved, not accounting for the aircraft themselves, valued at $238,329 each, totaling $58,859 in preserved assets. The 91st Bombardment Group's combat record reflected the system's effectiveness. The group flew 340 combat missions between January 1943 and April 1945. Aircraft equipped with drum-fed tail defenses, 1.3% loss rate. Standard aircraft, 5.8% loss rate. Tail gunners in modified aircraft claimed 347 enemy fighters destroyed, 31% of the group's total air-to-air kills, despite modified aircraft representing only 23% of the group's strength. 3 Medals of Honor were awarded to tail gunners serving in modified B-17s between February and June 1944, including Staff Sergeant Michael O'Brien. His citation, dated May 18, 1944, specifically noted extraordinary heroism and devotion to duty while defending his aircraft from sustained enemy attack despite catastrophic structural damage that should have made accurate gunnery impossible. The technology transfer extended beyond American forces. The Royal Air Force evaluated captured drum assemblies in March 1944 and incorporated similar systems into late production Avro Lancaster bombers. The Soviet Union, receiving technical specifications through Lend-Lease channels, developed the VYA-23 autocannon mounting system using comparable stabilization principles. Modern applications of the drum feed concept appear in the M61 Vulcan 20mm rotary cannon, the Goalkeeper CIWS naval defense system, and various armored vehicle weapons platforms. The gyroscopic stabilization technology evolved into the computerized gun stabilization systems used in contemporary M1 Abrams tanks and AH-64 Apache helicopter targeting systems. Staff Sergeant Michael O'Brien completed 35 combat missions with the 91st Bombardment Group, flying his final mission on June 3, 1944. Final confirmed kill count: 19 enemy aircraft, 16 from tail gunner position, 3 while temporarily manning a waist gun position during a mission where both waist gunners were wounded. His decorations included the Medal of Honor, Distinguished Flying Cross with 2 oak leaf clusters, Air Medal with 4 oak leaf clusters, and Purple Heart with 1 oak leaf cluster. He was promoted to Technical Sergeant on April 1, 1944, and a Master Sergeant on July 15, 1944. O'Brien returned to the United States on August 2, 1944. He spent 6 weeks at Walter Reed Army Hospital, receiving treatment for shoulder injuries and frostbite damage to his face and hands. Medical evaluation rated him 40% disabled. He was honorably discharged on October 18, 1944, with full medical benefits. Post-war, O'Brien returned to Boston and worked as a machinist for General Electric, where he contributed to development of aircraft gun turret systems, bringing his combat experience directly into engineering applications. He married Kathleen Murphy on June 12, 1946. They had 4 children. O'Brien rarely discussed his combat experiences publicly, but he remained active in the 91st Bombardment Group Association and attended reunions regularly until 2003. He died on November 7, 2008, at age 87, in his home in Quincy, Massachusetts. The original Devil's Own B-17G, serial number 42, 3173 was scrapped at RAF Bassingbourn on February 24, 1944. The damaged fuselage was deemed beyond economical repair. However, the drum feed tail defense system was salvaged, refurbished, and installed in a replacement aircraft. That system remained operational through the end of the war. The drum-fed tail defense system itself evolved continuously through 1944 and 1945. The final production variant, designated T4 Mod 7, increased ammunition capacity to 4,500 rounds through use of lighter drum materials and improved feed mechanisms. 12 of these systems survive in museums today, including fully functional examples at the National Museum of the United States Air Force and the Imperial War Museum, Duxford. If this story moved you the way it moved us, do me a favor. Hit that like button. Every single like tells YouTube to show this story to more people. These men, Michael O'Brien, Raymond Chen, Robert Hayes, and every member of Devil's Own's crew, they deserve more than silence. They deserve to be remembered. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We're rescuing forgotten stories from dusty archives every single day. Stories about the innovations that changed warfare. Stories about the men who turned desperation into victory. Stories that the history books somehow forgot to tell. Drop a comment right now and tell us where you're watching from. Are you watching from the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia? We've got viewers in 73 countries, and every comment helps this video reach people who need to hear these stories. You're not just a viewer. You're part of keeping these memories alive. You're the reason Michael O'Brien's name doesn't disappear into Pentagon filing cabinets and faded mission reports. You're the reason his grandchildren can search YouTube and find the truth about what their grandfather did on February 20th, 1944, at 27,300 feet above Brunswick, Germany, in a tail section that shouldn't have been attached to the aircraft. Thank you for watching, and thank you for making sure Staff Sergeant Michael O'Brien and the 91st Bombardment Group don't disappear into silence. These men deserve to be remembered, and you're helping make that happen. Every view, every share, keeps their legacy alive. They gave everything. The least we can do is remember their names.